This week on Ebert Presents at the Movies, it's that time of year for dressing up, ordering corsages, and going to prom.
You were gonna kiss me.
If I'm about to kiss you, you'll know it.
Werner Herzog gives us an exclusive look into the Cave of Forgotten Dreams.
This cave had been perfectly sealed for tens of thousands of years.
Plus, Roger reviews Fast Five.
This is $100 million.
I just don't get it. All this for one night. It's just prom.
Prom happens to be fun.
Not for the guys. You gotta buy dinner. You gotta get the little flower thing.
Don't pretend you don't know what it's called.
Oh.
When you're 17, there's nothing bigger than your senior prom. That's at least what our first movie is saying. I'm Christy Lemire of the Associated Press.
And I'm Ignasty Vishnevetsky of Movie.com. With a title as generic as Prom, you know that our first film is going to play by every little rule in the teen movie playbook. Do the characters look more like college seniors than high school seniors? Sure. Is the protagonist an overachieving girl with an overbearing working class dad? Naturally. Is she going to be forced to work with a hunky bad boy who has a leather jacket, long hair, and a motorcycle? You bet.
I got a better idea. You're gonna help her rebuild.
Him. Mr. Dunnan, I really don't
Little
think
Miss Sunshine's right. You should listen to her.
This prom isn't rebuilt to her specifications. You won't graduate.
You can't do that. You can't keep me from graduating.
You know what? I had a talk with myself about that. Turns out I'm okay with it.
Now, I know you're probably wondering, is there a subplot involving a girl who's afraid to tell her boyfriend that she's going to a different college? Well, of course.
And M is for University of Michigan, of course, because that's our next chapter together. But I'm getting ahead of myself because before graduation and college and the rest of our lives together, there's something that I need to ask.
What about some oddball supporting characters that spend the entire movie trying to ask someone out? Prom has them in spades.
No! Stop, sir! Stop! Truck! No!
Prom isn't bad per se, it's just compulsively ordinary. The movie has a cast of largely likable unknowns, but it follows every single teen movie cliche, even the ones that felt contrived in 1986, as though they were holy scripture. That and the often belabored joke setups kill any spark it might have. Thumbs down for me.
I kind of have to give it a thumbs up. The earnestness of it grew on me. And yes, it is like an extended version of some Disney Channel sitcom. And yes, they're all types, and you and I know that because we're old and cynical. But if you're 12...
I'm young and cynical.
You are both, that is true. But I'm vaguely middle-aged and cynical. But if you're like 12 and you're looking forward to going to prom someday, you don't know that prom sucks. But if you're looking forward to the glamour and the fun and that magical night, it's kind of exciting. It's like Citizen Kane for 12-year-old girls, I think.
You're praising formula, not a film.
I'm praising the formula because it works for its target audience. This is very similar, I think, to our favorite Justin Bieber movie in that we can't view it through our own prism. We have to look at it in terms of who it's aiming toward. And these kids are going to love it.
I am amazed that Hollywood can construct a convincing-looking teenage girl's bedroom. You know, get all of these details right. Yet they cannot design a convincing teenage girl. These people are not like real teenagers. They're like characters in a teen movie.
No, they are idealized versions of what teenagers should be. I mean, hey, nobody smokes or drinks in this high school, but it's wholesome for younger kids and for families to feel good about sending their kids to. It's idealized and wholesome, and I kind of like that.
Those families should send their kids to better movies.
Right, no, it's guileless. It's totally earnest. I think that's kind of sweet about it.
I don't think it's totally earnest. I think it's just a product that fulfills certain needs. The only satisfaction I think anyone could get from it is knowing what's going to happen next.
No, but the kids who it's aiming toward don't know that. We know that because we've seen these movies, because we lived through the 80s or whatever. For these kids, it's new and exciting and kind of sweet and refreshing.
I think it's so ingrained into television and into sitcoms that they'll know it even if they haven't seen the movie.
Here's a look at movies now playing in theaters.
Our next film may not have teenagers, but it has Vin Diesel. Roger reviews Fast Five.
The new action thriller Fast Five is a skillful example of what I like to call a crash, crash, bang, bang movie. This is Rick Cogan speaking for Roger Ebert. It brings together Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, and Jordana Brewster from two earlier Fast and Furious movies and relocates them to Brazil, where they want to steal a bank vault.
Spikes to hit, Dom. We got spikes.
We're going right.
Nah, it's too tight. We're not gonna fit.
We got no choice now.
Yes, I said they want to steal a bank vault, not break into it. They use steel cables to drag it behind two high-performance cars on a high-speed chase. I'm not convinced you can do that in real life. Dwayne Johnson, another muscular action star, joins the cast. He's a cop, so of course he has to have a mano-a-mano with Vin Diesel. The movie is non-stop wall-to-wall action, including something I've noticed in several movies lately. Rooftop jumps that would break the ankles of a lot of people, not to mention their legs. But the movie is high-energy escapism and action sequences are well-constructed, and Diesel and The Rock can somehow almost seem plausible in this stuff. From me, a moderate thumbs up.
Thank you, Roger. Our next movie is Sympathy for Delicious, the directing debut from actor Mark Ruffalo. Christopher Thornton, Ruffalo's longtime friend who also wrote the script, stars as the title character, a DJ known as Delicious D. He's in a wheelchair and homeless, living on Skid Row in Los Angeles. But one day he discovers he has the power of faith healing.
My man, look, you got the healing touch.
I got nothing to do with you, man.
I want to thank you. And I want to thank you.
I got nothing to do with you. I didn't do anything.
Okay. All right, let's break it up here. There's nothing to see. Dean had nothing to do with this.
That's Ruffalo himself in a supporting role as the Catholic priest who encourages Delicious to use his newfound gift for good. He also wants to use it as a fundraising tool. But Delicious wants to return to his music and ends up joining a rock band that includes a drug addict played by Juliette Lewis.
I have a band, and I really want you to come jam with us tomorrow.
Well, I don't play with bands.
Only on the Snide Diaper remix and the Indefatigable Scratch Clowns for a year. You are that Delicious D, right? Or is there another one?
It's hard to tell what Ruffalo and Thornton are satirizing here. Religious fervor, fame, rock star wretched excess.
You'll see it's pretty standard contract. 7-year negotiation clause on my end, plus a few extra amenities because I'm so hands-on. And we can talk about sweetening your end. How do you feel about a signing bonus?
Sympathy for Delicious feels unfocused, so it's not terribly effective. Ruffalo spent more than a decade trying to get this movie made. And I'm thinking that maybe he was too close to the material and couldn't really see it for what it was for.
Well, I think it's unclear what the film is satirizing because it's not a satire.
It absolutely is a satire.
It is not a satire.
Okay.
It is a drama about these two characters, about the Thornton character and the Ruffalo character, who, are confronted with this miracle, and both of them kind of make the wrong decision and then justify it to themselves. Now, admittedly, there's some satirical material in the middle portion, and I feel like that section is kind of scattershot. The film somewhat loses its way. But once we get to the trial that kind of dominates the later part of the movie, I think it comes back and it refocuses on this dynamic between Thornton and Ruffalo, who are incidentally really good together.
They have a couple of good scenes together, and then Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney, who've of course worked together before, you can count on me, they have a couple of good scenes together as well. But the faith healing stuff is very intentionally over the top, and the rock star stuff is very intentionally over the top. And that's why I believe it's a satire, but I don't think it hits its targets ever well enough.
I will concede that those scenes are scattershot, but I think that when it works as just a drama between these two characters, it more than makes up for maybe some of the weakness of the Bloom scenes. I mean, as I said, when we were talking about Prom, it seems like no one can make a convincing teenage girl. It seems like no one can make a convincing band either. It's kind of falling back on these cliches.
But Christopher Thornton's not convincing either. He's just surly and he's angry and there's nothing to him. There's no arc there. There's no evolution.
There's an intensity to that performance, and especially
it's all one note though.
But just the way Ruffalo shoots him, he always shoots him from a low angle with the camera looking up at his, at his face, whether he's in the car or he's in the wheelchair. It is maybe one note, but it has this intense scuzziness. And it really works.
No, the whole look of it's intensely scuzzy.
Especially when it changes abruptly towards the end.
No, the whole look of it is like grimy and sort of suffocatingly so.
Well, moving on, Cave of Forgotten Dreams is a new documentary by Werner Herzog about the Chauvet Cave in France, which is home to the earliest known artworks in the world. Its walls are covered with hundreds of paintings that are believed to be about 30,000 years old. Herzog narrates the film himself in his trademark half-whispered German accent.
These images are memories of long-forgotten dreams. Will we ever be able to understand the vision of the artists across such an abyss of time?
As usual, he hones in on some strange characters, including a circus performer turned scientist who is captivated by the drawings.
After 5 days, I decided not to go back in the cave because I needed time just to relax and take time to
absorb it.
To absorb it, yeah.
Herzog has said that this is the only film he'll make in 3D, and his choice of the format is no gimmick. Cave of Forgotten Dreams is all about the images. As we're reminded again and again in the film, the walls of the cave are not flat, and when lit by torchlight, they give the paintings an illusion of movement. Herzog uses the depth of the 3D image to recreate the illusion and that sense of wonder and mystery that the cave had for its painters. It's one of the finest uses of this new medium that I've seen.
Yeah, I am not a big fan of the 3D in general, as you know, but it's so useful here and so beautiful. It makes everything so tactile. The walls are curved, and yet there's like scratches and there's torch marks on them.
The cave bear marks that they keep pointing out.
And it's like you can reach out and touch them because of the 3D, and he's never gimmicky with it. It's never stuff being flung at you or whatever, but it's very, very useful in immersing you in this. And I love when he narrates his own stuff because he's like a little kid who is so giddy about these discoveries, and he wants to bring you along with him and show you all the cool stuff he's found. And you get to hear him say things like proto-cinema. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And he gets a sense of wonder across so well, but so simply by, showing these images in 3D and seeing how this perspective shifts, just by moving the camera around, or at one point they're just moving a light back and forth in front of like a picture of a horse.
Right. I like also the cast of characters you see here. They determine that the same person did all of these paintings because there's a little handprint.
Oh, yeah, the pinky, the crooked
finger
pinky
is broken. And that's such a cool little detail to discover. Like, what a great mystery. And then you have these people like the perfume expert who is sniffing around and trying to find other caves that are hidden in there.
He feels to me like, Herzog will occasionally insert fictional material into his films. I mean, he'll sometimes hire actors.
Think this guy's fake? The perfume guy is
I think
fake?
the perfume guy is
Don't
just
tell me
like,
that.
it's just like Bells from the Deep, where he has the people who are lying on the snow trying to see if they can, hear the sunken city or whatever.
I
think
want
this
to
is the
believe
perfume.
that. No, I want to believe perfume guy sniffing around in the woods.
The perfume man is simply too perfect. It's got to be a Herzog invention.
And then the last thing at the end with the albino alligators. I want to know more about them. That's brilliant. Okay, next up is the incredibly bloody 13 Assassins, the latest from the prolific Japanese cult director Takashi Miike. It's a remake of a 1963 film of the same name. A group of samurai comes together to kill a particularly evil and sadistic lord to keep him from ascending to the throne. Taking him out is the right thing to do, and it keeps him from being obsolete, for now.
命を捨て大事をなす時が来た。物々だ。覚悟は良いな。
Like many a classic Western, or like a Japanese version of Ocean's 11, if you will, 13 Assassins features the always amusing process of rounding up a motley crew for this dangerous task. But when it comes time to put their plan into action, they fight as one. You could argue that Miike is celebrating the same kind of violence he condemns in his villains, but when the good guys are the ones wielding their swords, it's okay, right? Anyway, thumbs up from me.
Look, I kind of love this movie.
Yeah?
I mean, To me, Miike is just he's one of the greatest directors in the world. He's maybe the only person who is completely at home making, really slow art house films, and just as at home making, over-the-top action movies. It's really interesting to see him make something so, you could almost say simple and schematic, because the movie essentially consists of two halves. You have this hour-long build-up, which is great. It moves really, really fast. We meet every single character. It's established exactly why they have to kill this guy.
They're all well fleshed out.
Yeah, no, and it just keeps moving and moving and moving, and people are constantly talking. It never pauses. And then, for the second hour, it is this battle scene that takes up, the entire second half of the film, where you see, these 13 guys fight 200 people, but it also continues building on the characters at the same pace as it had in the first hour. We're still kind of figuring things out about them, even though they're fighting throughout the entire second half of the movie.
And one thing I enjoyed too, it's a surprise for us, like it is for all these evil guards, what the attack's going to be like. Because unlike a lot of heist movies where you see them plan the heist and then see them go into action, you're not really quite sure what this big ambush is going to be. When the pieces all fall into place, it's like, that was cool, that was clever.
The burning bulls running through the street.
Yeah.
And now it's time for our Hot and Now segment. It's been 30 years since the film Blowout was released in theaters. Now you can see it on Blu-ray. Here's our contributor Matt Singer as he looks at why the sound for this film is so memorable.
In modern movies, sound is always present but rarely noticed. We just take it for granted until something happens that shatters the illusion of reality. Now, one of the smartest and most entertaining movies ever made about the subject of sound in film is available on Blu-ray for the very first time. In Brian De Palma's Blowout, John Travolta plays Jack Terry, a sound man for low-budget exploitation pictures who accidentally records a political assassination disguised to look like a car accident. Unwittingly, Travolta is drawn into a conspiracy and cover-up far sleazier than anything in one of his B-horror films.
Well, you heard the blowout.
Yes, I heard the blowout, but the first sound I heard was a bang.
This is kind of an echo.
No, look, I know what an echo sounds like. I'm a sound man.
Blowout is a suspenseful thriller and a tender and sad love story between Travolta and Nancy Allen, but most importantly, Blowout is a brilliant expose of sound in cinema, how it's made and how it works. Sound plays a huge role in the film's plot, and it becomes Jack's greatest ally and his greatest enemy. It helps him solve a murder mystery, but it also lets the film's villain, played by a wonderfully evil John Lithgow, spy on him through a wiretap. Sound is everywhere in Blowout, even in its visuals. It's no coincidence that Lithgow's character wears a Bell telephone uniform, or that the anniversary of another Bell, the Liberty Bell, serves as the setting for the climactic chase. By exposing us to a sound man's process, De Palma reinvents our relationship to sound in movies. Suddenly, we're hyper-aware of everything we hear. And by showing us how easily sounds can be altered, De Palma plays devil's advocate to his own protagonist. Jack thinks his tape of the accident is concrete evidence of a crime, but De Palma repeatedly shows how easily film can be manipulated to suit the director's purpose. If you can fake a scream, why can't you fake a murder? De Palma isn't just interrogating sound in cinema, he's questioning the very nature of truth on film. At the end of Blowout, after Jack has sacrificed everything for what he believes in, his very last gesture in the movie is to cover his ears to try to block sound out completely. It's not an easy thing to do, unless you have a sound man to do it for you. All right, that felt good. Sound all right?
Thank you so much, Matt. Now, Blowout is one of my favorite films, which is why it's my pick this week for Hot and Now. It's a masterpiece by any measure, and a film of profound disillusionment, not only with politics, but with our own ability to change the world around us. It's not only the high-water mark of De Palma's career as a director and screenwriter, but also the finest performance of John Travolta's career. His character is a lonely, ultimately tragic figure, an idealist who pretends to be a cynic.
Okay, calm down. Now, the sound is very clear. It's the picture that's a little fuzzy.
Nobody'd believe it. They'd say I made it up in a lab, and they'd be right. Well, who's ever in on this thing has contacts with the police because they want McRyan to sink without a trace. They don't want to hear about my gunshot.
Though it was released in 1981, Blowout has been rightly called the last film of the 1960s, a pessimistic epilogue to an already distant decade of political and social change. Matt's already talked about the film's extensive use of sound, but the camera work and the editing, including De Palma's trademark split screens, are just as carefully used. It's a perfectly constructed film about human imperfection, making that infamous final shot all the more devastating.
My hot and now pick is the mesmerizing Italian film Le Quattro Volte. It follows Pythagoras' idea that the soul passes through 4 stages: human, animal, vegetable, and mineral. Writer-director Michelangelo Framartino traces the journey that connects an aging shepherd, a newborn goat, a giant fir tree, and finally the wood coal that the tree becomes. Le Quattro Volte is absolutely gorgeous. It's essentially wordless, with Framartino allowing the images to speak for themselves. He comes up with moments that are so fragile and intimate. He makes you wonder how he got so close to capture them. And yet he also makes you wonder what's real and what's not, whether you're watching a documentary or some kind of hybrid of fiction and reality. Now, it may not be a hot and now where you are just yet. It may be a hot and soon. It's been playing in New York, Los Angeles, and a few other places, but opens in various cities across the country through July. So go find it.
Now it's time for something new. A few weeks ago, we asked our Facebook fans to send in movie questions to me and Christy. After great feedback on that Facebook exclusive, we've decided to answer a few more right here on the show. So I've got my sheet of questions. Christy has hers. The first one comes from Gant Smith. The physical experience versus the home theater experience. That's not really a question, that's a sentence fragment, but I think it's sufficiently evocative.
Ideally, you should see everything in a theater, the way it's intended. You know, it's not necessarily always possible. You have kids, you have a weird job and weird hours. It's not always that easy. Movies are very expensive. It's easier sometimes to just, you know, stream them on Netflix or whatever. But something like Avatar, something like Cave of Forgotten Dreams, you should see in a theater because it's so gorgeous.
You know, I think they both have their pluses. You know, I love going to the movies, but there are also certain things that you only notice when you see it on a really small screen.
Like what?
I feel like you get a better sense of maybe the design or sometimes the intention. I feel like when you see something on a big screen, and I tend to sit in the front row, there's something wonderful about how it overwhelms you.
Yeah.
But when you see it on a little TV screen, and I own a fairly small TV, you kind of get to step back and you get a better idea of maybe what the intentions of the filmmakers are.
I get distracted. Like, I want to do laundry, want to run dishes. Next up, from Garrett Rankin. How many movies, on average, do you see per week for your job? Kind of ties into our last question.
Yeah.
How many do you see?
I think nowadays I probably see an average of about 15 movies per week.
Okay.
Of those, 5 or 6 are for work.
Okay.
And the other 9, or however, are for pleasure, you could say, or curiosity.
Right.
Really curiosity more often than not.
Someday you will have a child, and you will not have time to watch 15 movies.
I'll watch them at night.
It's hard. It's hard to find time. I would say during award season, right? Like, or leading up to award season, rather. Like November, December, I'll see like 3 movies a day, usually, which to you is nothing. To you, I know, is like breakfast, 3 movies a day. Because you were seeing, what, 10 or 12 hours of film a day at some
Yeah,
point?
there was a time when I watched something like 30 movies a week, yeah.
But I kind of don't like the 3 movie days, because they all kind of turn into mush in my brain, and I want time for them to marinate, and it's hard.
Really, I like the way they interact, because sometimes you only really notice a detail about the first film once you get to the 3rd or 4th film, and then you have something to compare it with.
It's confusing. I don't know. Anyway, so thank you for that question. Good question.
Thank you. Our 3rd question comes from Kevin Summerfield, who says, another question, have you ever walked out of a film that you saw in the theater? I know that you've walked out of a film.
I did, and it wasn't in a theater. It was in a screening, but it was the first Saw movie. And I wasn't reviewing it. I would never walk out of a movie I was reviewing, of course, but I had just heard all this buzz about it, and this is, you know, the impetus of torture porn and all of that, the birth of torture porn. I thought, I've got to check this out. But the scene where they put the gun to the little girl's head, this is before I was even anybody's mother, but the scene with the gun being put to the little girl's head seems so needless and gratuitous and exploitative. I'm like, I'm out of here. I've never seen any Saw movies since. I have no idea what happens in the Saw series.
I've seen every single. It's like
it's
a soap opera.
It's a gaping hole in my filmography.
It's like a soap opera. It is a gaping hole in your filmography.
Okay.
I've stayed through to the end on some terrible films seen in film festivals, and I've stayed through. You know, actually, we just reviewed 13 Assassins, there's a great quote from Takashi Miike that I always think of where he says that I can never understand why anyone would ever walk out on a movie. And because you always find, even in a terrible film, you find something worthwhile.
So thank you for that great question, and for all these questions. We love doing this, so please send in more. We'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so wrapping up what we talked about on this week's show. We're split on Prom. I liked it. Ignasty did not, because he hates fun. We also split on Sympathy for Delicious. 2 thumbs up for Cave of Forgotten Dreams. Another 2 thumbs up for 13 Assassins. Plus, Roger gives a thumbs up to Fast 5.
Well, join us next week for reviews of the much-talked-about film The Beaver, starring Mel Gibson.
Look at you. I'm sick.
And from the Marvel Universe, it's Thor.
Also, don't forget, you can join the discussion on Facebook and on Twitter. Until then, the balcony is closed.
Palma said sometimes his films aren't taken as seriously as they should be because he makes thrillers.
They think of it essentially as a B-movie form, and because it has no content that they can discuss at their cocktail parties, and seems basically there for thrills and chills. No question about it. I'm not a popular guy on the Sunset Strip.
For more reviews and more from Roger's office, visit our website at ebertpresents.com.